Chapter 113 to 114. Both Konoha and Kiri ninja armies hurled ranged jutsu and weaponry at each other. Kiri ninjas tried to get to land while Konoha ones were fervently doing everything in their capabilities to prevent precisely that. Unfortunately for Kiri troops, what the third Mizukage had in terms of talent for large-scale tactics, he lacked in the actual commanding aspect. The man could manipulate the entire war with just a few deployment orders and faint troops movements, but when it came to him leading men into battle, that's why despite Kiri forces being 4 times larger, they were still kept at bay, wasting chakra by having to walk on the water. The battle progressed and both sides started losing people due to the ranged attacks. The Mizukage was starting to contemplate retreat as he saw the incredibly disadvantageous deadlock for his army, but then finally some of his soldiers reached the land. He felt overjoyed at the opportunity to turn the tables only for his hopes to crash down when his ninjas on the land, who focused mostly on securing an easier passage through the hail of fireballs, kunais, shurikens, and explosive tags, were surprised by the earth turning into swamp courtesy of Jiraiya. The problem of Kiri forces was that while numerous, they had only a very few of their forces fighting, and those in the backlands had nothing to do due to being unable to get in range. In short, they were stuck. Finally, Himino had enough and temporarily took command, ordering the Kiri ninjas to spread, which changed the entire battle. The Mizukage would protest if he didn't know he brought her exactly for that, to cover his shitty commanding. Instead of trying to rush through the focused ranged attacks of the enemy, the Kiri forces spread out to the left and right, taking advantage of their numbers. It didn't take long for some of them, mostly these furthest to the right or left, to finally reach land without much resistance, as Konoha forces couldn't spread out enough to cover the sides due to insufficient numbers. The battle on the land started. As the Konoha and Kiri forces finally reached the state of both fighting in more melee combat, the third Mizukage engaged in a battle with the third Hokage, while Himino was intercepted by a woman around 20 years old with long red hair. The third Hokage spun his staff, trying to hit the third Mizukage with fast-paced and powerful swipes, while the third Mizukage flowingly dodged like an expert dancer, bending his body in ways to most thought impossible while occasionally hurling hidden senbons with incredibly powerful poison at the third Hokage from his sleeves or blocking the staff with the sword he held. After all, Kirigakura was heavily invested in swordsmanship, so the third Mizukage was naturally good at handling swords despite being more of an assassin than anything else. Their fight was very fast-paced, and the third Mizukage made sure to limit the third Hokage by fighting near Konoha ninjas, causing the old monkey to be unable to use strong and destructive ninjutsu. Despite this massive advantage, the third Hokage has shown the exact reason why he was called the god of shinobi. The third Mizukage was being pushed back. Horribly so. There were no interruptions to talk nor any condescending insults. The battle started and continued being completely silent, both men focusing only on murdering the other with precise brutality of their strikes. Not one sweep of the third Hokage's staff was aimed at a non-vital place. Not one counterslash from the third Mizukage would not be fatal if it hit despite him being pressured. Both were exchanging a flurry of strikes, slashes, blocks, parries moving across the battlefield while ignoring the general chaos of jutsu, summoning animals, and weaponry with exploding tags flying around as the two armies clashed. Muscles ached, bodies protested, and bruises formed almost with every move, but neither of the Kages slowed down in their resolve to win, waiting for an opportunity to land a fatal strike. Himino panted as she had to freeze yet another massive amount of water that came at her from the sea because of the jutsu of the overzealous redhead who decided to fight her. "Damn, you have incredible Suiton," she praised between her labored breaths, trying to stall for time to recover. Fortunately for her, her opponent seemed to be a brash idiot. "You bet, Databane. Name's Kushina Uzumaki. Your Hayaton is incredible. It's such a pity we are enemies. We can feel we could have been good friends, but for Konoha I will defeat you. Believe it." The redhead gave Himino a thumbs up, causing her jaw to almost fall onto the floor as she blankly stared. "What the fuck?" Himino, for the first time in her life, was startled by the sheer stupidity of her opponent. She was unable to comprehend what was going on because since she was just a little girl, she was taught to exploit any opening, but the sad excuse for all power but no brains in front of her was akin to something out of her wildest dreams. Alas, Kushina's talk no jutsu was quite underdeveloped compared to Naruto, so no enemy-to-friend conversion happened. While Kushina was talking, Himino finally got her breathing under control and prepared herself for the continuation of their fight. She now knew she would not win an honest ninjutsu fight. For that, the woman in front of her had too much chakra. Heck, the redhead didn't seem even winded after 30 high-ranked large-scale Suiton jutsu, while Himino was almost on the floor from exhausting much of her chakra too fast. Himino knew she still had over half of her chakra reserves, but she felt very drained after their previous quick jutsu exchange. Himino quickly ascertained that the woman in front of her was one of the noble types, so she pulled out her tanto, resisting a smug smirk from appearing on her face when the redhead mirrored her action by pulling out a katana, readying for a weaponry clash. Both women jumped at each other, slashing their swords only for the blades to meet in between them. Kushina's self-assured face quickly revealed shock, only to morph into realization followed by panic as she quickly jumped away. Himino smugly smiled as she saw Kushina's clothes starting to dye themselves red due to ice skewering her as the redhead panted, glaring at her. Himino had no desire to play by the book when her sword had a smaller reach and was most likely of poorer quality. She naturally added Hayatan chakra into the blade in order to create ice spikes at any given moment and did so the second their blades met, riddling Kushina's body with wounds. It was too obvious from your expression you are too confident. Himino started talking, trying to distract Kushina into a conversation while discreetly feeding chakra into the shards of ice in Kushina's body. While the redhead managed to get away from the ice spikes without tearing them apart, some shards were still in her. It was a very hard thing to affect the shards and required incredible control despite giving almost no result, but right now, as long as it widened Kushina's wounds, Himino didn't care. Unfortunately, Himino miscalculated as Kushina's eyes became red with black slits, and Himino instantly felt the connection to the ice shards disappear as Kushina's wounds started healing at a visible rate. It didn't take even 5 seconds for Kushina's eyes to return back to violet and her face to reveal a winning smile. I won't lose, Databane. A fucking Jinchuriki. My luck. Himino cursed, throwing a blank stink eye at the beaming Kushina, who just shrugged off wounds that would kill a lesser woman. Well, she bent her knees and raised her tanto in front of her. No choice, I guess. Kushina relished seeing the annoyance and frustration on the face of her foe after she used the chakra of the fox to heal herself. Admittedly, even the demon had its occasional uses. Kushina made sure her expression was that of confidence as she learned fast enough in her first month spent in Konoha that showing how despairing one was the biggest mistake she could make. The others would just capitalize on it, and so new, always cheerful, and completely confident Kushina was born. Nevertheless, seeing the crushed, frustrated, or resigned looks of her opponents always brought her some kind of sadistic joy. Well, she personally blamed that on being raised in Konoha. Prepare yourself, Kushina exclaimed as she ran at Himino, swinging her katana in a wide arc from the right side only for Himino to perfectly dodge by jumping back. Exactly as Kushina wanted. Himino quickly found 3 kunai flying at her while she was in the air due to her jump. She was forced to kawarimi, appearing behind Kushina before her hands started weaving hand seals, sending an ice spike hurling at Kushina, who just sidestepped it. Kushina was about to brag in order to show her confidence when a pained cry resounded through the surroundings, erasing her smug grin. Half turning in a way that would make it possible to look behind but also not lose sight of Himino, Kushina's eyes almost bulged as she realized a Konoha ninja was hit by the ice spike because she didn't block but dodged. Anger flared in her chest as her head whipped back to Himino with a heated glare. The tables have turned and Himino just smugly shrugged in a "what can you do?" manner while it was Kushina who was aggravated for once. Can't save them all, Himino playfully exclaimed in a mock sadness. She knew endurance-wise there was no contest between her and Kushina, so she went for the oldest trick in the books. Mind games. You, Kushina said darkly in a low tone, gritting her teeth. Sure, she knew people die in war. She killed her fair share after all. She was not even pissed the Konoha ninja died. Rather, she was pissed he died due to her blunder. If someone saw it, her reputation would be ruined. Damn it. Anger, huh? Simple enough. Himino hid her smile as she realized Kushina's biggest weakness. Kushina was livid, but despite that, no Kyubi chakra leaked from her due to her superb control. She instead decided to beat Himino with her own strength as she lunged into yet another melee sword clash. Exchanging strikes with Himino in a rapid flurry of deadly slashes at speeds most chunin would be hard-pressed to follow with their eyes. Both women started to accumulate slashes on their bodies, but most of those could be said to be akin to paper cuts compared to the scale of their sword fight. Himino and Kushina's clothes were bathed in their blood, either theirs or from the unfortunate ninjas who came in between them, and were promptly diced into pieces without the women even noticing as they uncaringly continued their fight, focusing only on their respective opponent. Kushina was fine. She lost quite a bit of blood, but overall, she felt fresh as daisies. She could go on and on for a few hours yet. Himino was fucked. There was no other way to describe it, as she was bloodied, dirty, battered, messy-haired, and worst of all, tired. She had had enough. Clearly, mixing Jinchuriki with an Uzumaki would create a freak of nature that just won't stop, she thought with apparent frustration ringing in her head. But thankfully Kushina was too noble for her own good, and Himino quickly noticed her penchant for not using her biggest advantage, ninjutsu, when her opponent doesn't use it too. Frankly speaking, Himino knew she should have been dead by now if the redhead actually played according to ninja rules, meaning dirty. She is more like a samurai. Himino mentally snorted, calculating the best plan to continue the fight. With a smirk, Himino straightened herself. So, she drawled, up for another ninjutsu fight, princess? And Kushina was instantly annoyed and angered again. Not much but enough to change the way they fought. Himino no longer needed to engage in a sword fight with the horrendous disadvantage of a shorter blade and less experience compared to a Kenjutsu prodigy with a clan-based style like Kushina. During their long clash, Himino led Kushina exactly where she wanted her, and that was the end of her need to fight with Kenjutsu. Bring it! Kushina's eyes flashed, realizing they were far away from any ally who could be injured by large-scale attacks. Her hands instantly started weaving seals, as she failed to notice the small smirk on Himino's face. Kushina finished her seals and clapped her palms together as she shouted, "Water release! Whirlpool torrent!" A massive amount of swirling, whirlpool-like torrent of water appeared and quickly flew at Himino, destroying trees all around. Himino just enhanced her legs with chakra and jumped to the side, evading the jutsu as 5 ice needles appeared in front of her with one-handed seal. Ice style, ice needles. The needles flew at Kushina, who grinned and clapped her hands together. Water release, water wall. A wall of condensed water that rotated around Kushina appeared, blocking the ice needles before Kushina started creating an inhuman amount of water. Water release, mega water prison. The water created a humongous sphere, 100 meters tall, with the previous position of Himino right in its middle, and Kushina released a strained breath, holding the water in a spherical shape. She then conjured her chakra chains and sent them into the sphere to seek and skewer anything that moved inside. This was her finishing move. Because of Kushina's incredible focus, she didn't notice Himino rising from a small patch of frozen, mirror-like ground. This was nothing like Haku's speed-enhancing mirror technique. This was a real space-time ice mirror transportation, the thing that made Himino into a famous assassin. Kushina paid dearly for lowering her guard as a long ice spike lodged itself right through her abdomen. And even then she was quite lucky. She instinctively leaned to the side, otherwise she would be dead. Kushina was not one to forfeit the fight. She let the water prison end and the water came crashing onto the ground, causing the forest around to be changed into a small lake with crowns of the trees peeking from the surface. Kushina changed the environment to suit her best. Himino used water walking to stand on water, as did Kushina, but her eyes widened when she got a glimpse of chakra chains going under the water from Kushina's back. Only barely did Himino manage to dodge the chakra chain shooting from the water below her as Kushina made her run around, chasing her with chakra chains while occasionally throwing a water bullet or some other water-release jutsu at her. All the while Himino did her damnedest to dodge, create more mirrors on the water surface. Sadly, they were being actively destroyed by Kushina, so Himino had to run more, and from time to time, Himino even hurled ice needles and ice spikes at Kushina. An hour passed and both disheveled women stood opposite each other, panting hard. Even the chakra powerhouse Kushina was almost floored due to exhaustion. While Himino dodged and focused on precise attacks, often guessing where Kushina would dodge and throwing an ice spear there right after throwing an attack on Kushina, Kushina focused more on her chakra chains and large-scale chakra exhaustive, massively destructive jutsu that could level the surrounding country. Hence, despite Himino having much lesser chakra reserves, Kushina was also spent. "Hiya, you are good." Kushina started praising Himino in between gulping air. She could respect the woman for being so agile and nimble. Hour of throwing S-rank jutsu at her and not one hit her. That, in Kushina's humble opinion, deserved recognition. Himino Yuki was a damn good ninja, especially with her bloodline that allowed her to use some kind of space-time bullshit to teleport through the ice. Kushina's eyes suddenly widened as she reached her hand in Himino's direction, making her look at Kushina funny before horror appeared on Himino's face when she realized Kushina was not feigning it. "Watch out!" Alas, it was far too late.